Have you ever wondered why a parent who you know loves their child might somehow find themselves repeating the exact same things that hurt them so much in their own childhood? It's a really tough question, and the answer, well, it lies in a really complex and often hidden emotion that we're going to unpack today. This phrase right here, "don't become happier than me," this is the silent, unconscious message that a parent with unhealed wounds might be sending to their child. I know, it's a shocking thought, but really digging into what this means is at the very heart of what we're talking about. I mean, on the surface, it just seems to go against every single parental instinct, right? But the reasons are usually buried way deep in the parent's own painful past. So let's dive in and unpack the psychology that's driving this destructive cycle. Okay, so first up, a painful repetition. You see, this whole cycle, it doesn't start with someone wanting to be mean. It often begins with a really horrifying moment of self-awareness for a parent. This right here, it's such a common and heartbreaking realization. A parent just suddenly sees their own parent's behavior staring back at them in the mirror. They remember how much they hated being treated that way, and yet they catch themselves doing the very same things, often with no idea why. So that brings us to our second point, the unspoken jealousy. That big question of why? Well, it often leads us to a really powerful hidden emotion that most parents would never, ever consciously admit to feeling. What if the root of this whole problem isn't about a lack of love at all? What if it's something way more complicated, like a deep unconscious envy of their child's happiness and freedom? Now, to be clear, this is not the loving adult parent speaking. This is the voice of their own unhealed inner child. You know, the part of them that never got the love and safety it needed, and now it's lashing out in pain. It's like this subconscious demand for some kind of twisted fairness. And let's be really clear about this. This doesn't make the parent an evil person. It makes them a person with a deep, unaddressed wound. They see their child having this great life, and that very happiness unconsciously pokes at their own past suffering. But this pain, it didn't just start with this parent. To really get the full picture, we need to zoom out and look at how this emotional wound gets passed down, like a link in a very painful chain. You can see the flow of that pain right here on this slide. It starts with the grandparents, who were likely victims themselves, and they pass their trauma down to the parent. Now that parent, because they never healed, unconsciously passes that same pain on to their own child. It's this tragic, emotional inheritance. This quote really highlights just how cyclical this whole thing is. The point isn't to try and find a single villain in the story, but to recognize that this is a repeating pattern of pain. And this way of looking at it is so important. It shifts the whole focus away from just blaming someone and toward responsibility. Now, it doesn't excuse the harmful behavior, not at all, but it does open the door for a little empathy, and most importantly, for the real possibility of change. That chain can be broken. Okay, section 4, the child as target. So, how is this trauma actually transmitted? Well, the parent who's carrying all this pain unconsciously finds an outlet, and tragically, that target is often the safest and most vulnerable person in their life. Think about it. All that anger and resentment the parent feels, it rightfully belongs with their own parents, the grandparents. But confronting them was, and probably still is, impossible or just feels way too dangerous. So all of that powerful emotion gets misdirected and it lands on the child, who is just an innocent, powerless bystander in all of this. This misdirection often turns into what psychologists call parentification. Basically, the parent starts treating their kid not like a child, but like a friend, or a therapist, or a confidant. They vent about adult problems and they force the child into all these roles they are completely unequipped to handle. And the result of this is just devastating. The child learns really quickly that their own needs, their own feelings, their experiences, they just don't matter. Their primary job becomes managing the parent's emotional state. They basically have to suppress their own identity just to survive. Wow. Okay, I know this all sounds incredibly bleak, but the most important part of this explainer is that this cycle is not unbreakable. There is absolutely a path forward, but it might not be what you think. You know, the first instinct might be to go confront the source of the pain, the grandparents, but that path, it rarely leads to any real healing. Trying to get an apology or some kind of revenge usually just reopens old wounds without giving you any real resolution. The only person you ever truly have the power to change is yourself.
So the healing doesn't happen by trying to fix the past or fix your parents. It happens when you decide to fix the part of you that is still hurting.
So, what does that path to healing actually look like? Well, it really comes down to these 3 steps. First, you have to bravely acknowledge that difficult feeling of jealousy without judging yourself for it. Second, you have to consciously separate your child from your past. They are innocent. And third, you have to commit to doing the work of healing that wounded child inside of you.
Ultimately, it all comes down to this powerful truth. The pain you inherited was not your fault, but the healing, that is your responsibility. And it's a responsibility not just to yourself, but to the next generation. You have the power to be the one who breaks the chain and to make sure this trauma ends with you.